Welcome to the Voices for Voices podcast, sponsored by Redwood Living. Thank you for joining us today. I am Justin Allen Hayes, founder and executive director of Voices for Voices, host, and Humanitarian. You can learn more about Voices for Voices on our Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and our website, voicesforvoices.org. Voices for Voices is a 501c3 nonprofit charity organization that survives solely on donations. So if you are able to, please consider heading over to our website to help us continue our mission and the goal and dream of mine to help 3 billion people over the course of my lifetime and beyond. Please welcome me in joining today's guest, all the way from the United Kingdom, Helen Pengelly. Thank you for joining us today, Helen.
Oh, hi, Justin. I'm very happy to be here.
Great. We're so excited to be able to have an opportunity to chat with you, be able to go through your experiences and helping others. And I know it's going to be awesome for our audience, our viewers, our listeners who check out our transcript everywhere to tune in and really learn from somebody that's gone through things, as well as coming out on the other side is helping others, as well as being not here in the United States for our domestic individuals that are going to be checking out this. That Voices for Voices, while we are based here in Northeast Ohio in the United States, we do want to help and reach out to as many people across the world, and we're so thankful for you to be with us today.
Thank you for asking me.
You bet, yeah. Let's go back to what caught my attention. First off, was that you like helping people, and whether that is, donating money, donating time. I saw, in the early 2000s that you were a math tutor and you wanted to help out. Can you just go into maybe a little bit about your background of helping others and where that comes from?
Yes, well, so I became a teacher in 2002, and I was going through quite a difficult time in my life. I was going through a divorce, and I suppose at that time, it was like you just think, okay, well, once I'm out of this marriage, it was an abusive marriage, and get me and the kids out of there, then life will be fine. But of course, that isn't how life works, is it? And then I left teaching after 3 years, and I had a business for a while, and I learned how to meditate, and that changed my life. And so it was my oldest son. I was having problems with him. He'd started drinking heavily and doing drugs, and then I sort of learned that I couldn't do much about him. He's on his journey, his path through life, but I have to, that it was okay to look after myself, and I had to, didn't have to put everybody else before me and put myself last.
Wow. How hard was that to take that focus from others a high percentage of the time, to be able to look back and say, I'm not going to be able to really help others and to be my best if I don't look out for myself?
Well, because I've got 3 sons, and so my oldest was, he was getting into trouble, and say he was drinking, doing drugs, and I was rushing around to try and get him help, but unless he wanted help, and he wanted to do that himself, there was nothing I could do. And I realized, well, I've got 2 younger sons that I need to be looking after as well. And if I'm spending all my time on him and trying to get him help, that's not fair on them. And I'm getting exhausted as well, and I haven't got enough energy left over for them.
Yeah, and how did that impact not just the meditation? You said that changed your life. If you could maybe go into a little deeper about that, but then also the cooking and gluten-free, and how maybe that impacted. Here in the United States, we might call it a little bit of an alternative method of helping, outside of the medications, that would say, okay, well, this is something that's different, but it can help others. So maybe if you can tie the meditation, kind of how that breakthrough came about, and maybe how the cooking and some of those other areas were helping you, and you were starting to find out that, hey, maybe I could help others.
Yeah. Well, at the end of my first year of teaching, I was diagnosed with celiac disease. So that's why, I had to then go onto a gluten-free diet. And so this was, say, nearly 20 years ago now, and there wasn't as much in the shops as there is now. And so I decided to set up a business selling gluten-free food, but good quality stuff, that you wouldn't get in the supermarkets, because a lot of the stuff you buy in the big shops is all mass produced and it's full of rubbish, and so on that journey I learned a lot about healthy eating and nutrition, and about how our food is produced, and about the food industry as a whole, and it's not all very pretty. And so and through having that business, a lot of people would come to me because oh yes, because they wanted the food, but it was more than that. It was because I was somebody who understood what they were going through. And I realised a lot of people were actually finding it quite hard, because when I found out I had to go onto a gluten-free diet, I was relieved, because I knew what was wrong, and I knew there was something that I could do, because I'd been really ill, and I knew here was something that I could do about it. And my grandfather had had celiac disease, so I knew what it was. And it was, whereas for a lot of people, I think it's more well known now, but back then, people would find out and they'd never heard of it before. And it was like, please, what do I do? What do I do? And so I used to, I had a lot of other friends that I met like in like local business groups and networking. And it was through that I went to a workshop with some people who did spiritual tours, and so they did a workshop with some meditation, some chanting, some breath work and movement and all that kind of thing. And then the next morning I just felt so calm, and I'd never felt like this before. And so I thought, oh, there's something in this. And so I just sort of went, seeking a class or somewhere I could go and find out more about it. And then one day I was out shopping, and there was just a little flyer by the till when I went to pay about a meditation class starting that week, and it was when my boys were at Scouts. So I didn't have to worry about babysitters and things like that. So it all just kind of like fell into place. And so then my oldest son left home, and that was he ran away and he disappeared for a while, and I didn't know where he was. But of course, there was nothing I could do about that, because I didn't have any way of contacting him. So I thought, well, I've got to look after my younger two sons, and I had to look after myself. And I think because there was something in me that must have known that this was going to help, because it was still quite new, but there was just maybe some kind of deeper knowing, some kind of faith that I kept going with this. And also the people that I met as well, they were just very open. Nobody was judging you, if you were going through difficult times, and you felt that you could just be open and talk about things that were going on, and nobody's going to think you're a bad person or anything. So so that was sort of how I got started, really. And this was a Buddhist group, and so this was about 2006. So there weren't any apps, we didn't have smartphones then, so you couldn't just download an app or go and listen to something on YouTube. You have to go and learn from a real teacher. And I still say that if you want to learn to meditate, these things aren't a substitute from going and learning. Like the Buddhist teacher I learned from, he'd probably been meditating for 20 odd years. So you can't get that in a 6-week course or just downloading an app. You get, because that person, if they've been through their own stuff, like we were saying before, it's like then you use these tools to help you you go through things. And I say to people, meditation, it's not like a magic wand. It doesn't make all your problems go away, but it changes how you deal with them. And it was like Wayne Dyer said, wasn't it? When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Yeah, that's fantastic, especially back in the time without smartphones, without the apps that were so heavily reliant on, that you were able to take something that was happening and you just kind of went with it. Nobody was telling you, hey, Helen, you need to go in this direction and you need to do these 5 things. You were just going in the direction that you felt that you were being led in, and I'm just guessing you started to feel a little bit better. It didn't solve everything, but maybe in certain situations it might have helped out be a little bit less stressful, maybe thinking about some things at like a higher level instead of being kind of, as I like to call it, in the weeds of the tactics of every little thing, still dealing with those, but being able to take a step back. And I find that that's something that I've learned, and it's not something that, well, there are classes and apps out there. It's not a one-stop shop, like you mentioned, that you can't go and fix all the problems. And maybe one day it's, now that we have smartphones and apps, maybe one day it is using an app. Maybe another day it's not. And that there's no wrong way of going about things. I find, and there's just lots of information out there that it says you have to do this, and if you don't do this, this won't help you. You got to do these 10 things in this order. And what I'm finding more for myself and in talking to experts like yourself is that it's a combination of things. What works today, where you might be at home today. And so there might be things close to you where that are just easier for you to get to when your mind gets at that spot. Or you may be traveling, or you may be doing other things, and that might put you in a different position. But having those tools available to you and knowing kind of when I need this, when I'm in this location or when I'm in this thought space, here's how I go about it. Can you maybe just touch on that, just a little bit more on it's not a one-stop shop, that situational dependence, individual dependence, who's around. If you're watching your children, there might be a little less time, so little ways of going about that.
Yeah, and apps are great, and I use them because they're a great way to like support your practice. Like once you know you have a teacher who will kind of teach you and guide you, but then you've got the app, like I use it for a timer and things like that. And then it just taking that pause, like you said, it just helps you to like take a step back before you just go into your habitual patterns and old ways of reacting, because most of what we do is unconscious and we don't even think about it. So it just gives you that that opportunity. The Buddha calls it the gap, and it's between something happening and you reacting to it. So but most of the time, most of us, we just like something happens and boom, we instantly react to that without even thinking. We think maybe we are, but most of the time it's just habitual, based on the patterns and conditioning that we've built up over the years, the things we were told when we were children and whatever, then it's like this big layer of stuff that you're gradually, like you might have heard the analogy, it's like peeling off the layers of an onion. You peel off one layer and then there's still more underneath, and until you get down to sort of who you really are. And but that being said, it's you get glimpses of it along the way. And another thing that really helps me is going on retreats, and I go and, because as I said, I love cooking, and I get to go and cook at a retreat centre and volunteer and just hang out there and learn from great teachers and get away from phones and emails and just have a bit of space and be in nature.
So yeah, you brought up a great tool of retreats. For those out there that are seeing this, hearing this, I know when I was younger learning about yoga. It was like this taboo thing. It was just this thing that's out there. Like who does that? Why would you go do something like that? And now it's very much mainstream, just as a topic, as well as retreats. And I think retreats maybe, at least when I first heard about that, I was like, oh, what do they do? Like, what are you able to do? Are you going to be secluded away from everybody? Can you maybe just walk through like what a retreat is and what the things that you like about it?
Yeah, well, a retreat, gosh, there are so many different types of retreats out there now. Lots of people doing them. What I like it's just a chance to slow down and just reducing the amount of input, because we have so much input and information coming at us, these days, because we've got, computers, internet, TV, radio, books, printed materials as well, and so much now that we just get overwhelmed. And not even, and sometimes it's not until you stop, it's like you realise, actually, I'm pretty exhausted, because we just keep going, and then perhaps, have some unhealthy habits to try and get through the day by drinking too much caffeine or sugar or whatever, which is not really very good for us either. And then at some point, the body or the mind is going to say, hold on, that's enough. And then it's going to have an impact on your health. And and I think, since the pandemic, people are realizing that now, that we just can't carry on like that. And, we've got to have more balance in our lives, and work. It's like this kind of, it's a very Western thing as well, isn't it? About being productive, being busy, and almost like having a badge, wearing it's a badge of honor. Oh, I'm so busy at the moment, I'm so stressed, and all this kind of thing. Whereas actually, that's not a good thing.
Yeah, and I equate it much like the Industrial Revolution, where machines were brought in and able to be programmed to do things much faster, much more efficient, reducing the need for kind of the human being to be in that manufacturing process in some instances. And I think that at that point, in the mid to late 1900s, when that was occurring, it was great, because, we can do things faster, it's less for us to produce, so we can charge less, and so our consumers will be happy. But I think a lot of that is kind of, I know a lot of that has kind of gone over into where we are today with what the pandemic really brought to light. Things were happening before the pandemic of, we can do more. I have my phone. Let me just check my email. Let me check my text messages. Let me just do one thing. Let me stay at the office an extra few minutes and and let the traffic go. And we're finding all these excuses in our minds. In the end, we're not built like machines. We're focusing our bodies. Used to be more in that hunter-gatherer standpoint of hunting for the food and gathering the food, so more in that physical sense. And as you know, we're more using that mental muscle and the brain. And as individuals and humans, we weren't kind of designed like that. And so making that transition is huge. So making the change in the body is big. And then if you take an individual like you or I with ADHD and working with people, it just makes things, like you said, it just layers one thing on top of another. And I know from my experience, it took me, I came up with 138 things that I felt guilty about in kind of my life that nothing illegal. I always have to preface that on the show. With relationships and blowing off, family get-togethers to do things more. I want to party, so I want to go out and hang out with my friends and do alcohol and drugs and those types of things. Where now being a little bit more productive and using that energy, that ADHD energy that I had, where I was doing kind of not so healthy things. Now I'm being able to do things like this, being able to talk with yourself in the United Kingdom here about things that are happening for us as human beings, no matter where we're at, no matter how many miles away we are, no matter how we speak, how we look, what politics, all that aside, we're we're just human beings trying to get through this. And I love just the way you transition into that peeling of that onion. The onion's there, whether we believe it or not, and then dealing with it, and at what point do we do that? And for myself, it was a crash, ended in a 5-day hospital stay, inpatient, and then with the treatment and things that I'm still doing here now, five years later. And others, maybe it's similar, or maybe others, they're on that journey and they're finding little things of, like, is it supposed to be like this? Is this what we do? Like, is what we do in life supposed to always just be attached to a paycheck? Or is it also supposed to be attached to kind of that emotional of, like, we want to like what we do, not just what a company tells us. Like, oh, well, here's the company's mission and vision and goals, and here's your spot here. And so I found myself in that kind of that corporate outlook for many years, and now finding the emotional side of things and being able to talk human to human about, like, wow, like, I'm not alone. That was the first thing I thought of. The first morning I was in my inpatient stay at the hospital was, I'm the only one that's dealing with this. I'm the only one that's gone through a situation. And then when I sat around, and there was probably about 10 other individuals, we went around the table and, why are you here? And each of us went through, and I was like, oh my gosh, even in my deteriorated state, I was finding myself like, wow, like, I thought I had it bad. I thought, like, what was going on with me was tough, and it is, but when you hear other people, it's like, oh my gosh, like, I can relate to other people as human beings. So how did healing with Helen start?
Right. Well, after I closed my my shop selling gluten-free food, and then I went back to teaching, and but I knew, well, that was just to earn some money, because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, and I'd had some coaching, and I was quite interested in becoming a coach. And when I went back into teaching, because I'd learned to meditate, it was a very different experience. And I was just thinking, well, why didn't I learn all this stuff when I was doing my teacher training? And I could see how, coaching, learning to meditate and mindfulness and things would help teachers. I mean, they're starting to do it with kids and things. I think, well, there's no point in doing it with the kids unless you teach the teachers, because the teachers are just going around reacting and not understanding why they're doing things the way that they do. And I think, because when I left after the first time, and I left teaching, I'd done it for 3 years, and I just couldn't, like you were saying, we're not programmed to sort of just work and sit down at a desk for 40 hours a week. And I just had this kind of sense that I could not face another year, although, there's a lot of variety, every day's different in teaching, of doing another year of teaching the same curriculum, and where every lesson is kind of planned out, and you just pick up the text, and this is what you do today. And I just felt stifled, and even the classroom that I was in just looked out on a brick wall. So it was, and as I went on, and I thought, oh, no wonder I was struggling. Of course, nobody was talking about mental health back then either, and I didn't even realise, that obviously after everything I'd been through with my divorce and everything, being a single mum, that of course that was going to have an impact on my mental health. It seems obvious now looking back. And so when I went back in, I worked as a substitute teacher, and so I went into lots of different schools, and I could just see the common things that were happening. That teachers were going off sick, because obviously I was in there to cover for them, and they were just all so stressed. And I could just walk into somebody's classroom, have a look around, and think, well, no wonder this person's ill. There was just, but you could tell they were probably just overwhelmed. There'd be papers piled everywhere, classrooms a mess, but everybody's so busy, and there wasn't really any proper support. So when I went and did my coaching training, my idea was to do this in schools, but it wasn't really, they were sort of like, some people could see that this would be a good thing, but as an institution, they hadn't really caught up. So when the pandemic hit, and then I couldn't go into schools anymore, that sort of gave me time to rethink what I was doing. And that's when I decided, well, because I did call my business Happy Teacher. So then that's when I changed it to Heal with Helen, because it's like you said before, we're all on this journey. It's not a one and done thing that we do something. And it's like, so I feel that I don't heal people. I support people in their own journey of healing themselves and dealing with their stuff. And then last year I realized, well, I was pretty sure I had ADHD. And once I didn't really know much about it, which is crazy, really, when you think I've been a teacher all those years. It was just like, if somebody said ADHD, you just think the stereotypical hyperactive boy running around the classroom and creating havoc. And so, but I could see when I started to understand about it more, that the things that I'd been doing, like the meditation, especially, really helped. And because I had a good understanding of how my mind worked. And like you said before about we're so disconnected from our bodies as well. And I, do a lot of yoga. I don't teach it, but I do yoga myself, and when meditating as well, and connecting with the body and this felt sense of what's happening, because all our emotions we feel as a sensation in the body, but most of the time, we're just stuck up in our heads and overthinking. So then that's kind of evolved over the last year, because I'd had to take some time out myself, because I just thought, I need to just take a step back, regroup, figure out what I want to do. And of course, then understanding about ADHD and the brain going at 1,000,000 miles an hour and having lots of ideas, and as in the past, it's like then difficulty following through or starting something and not finishing. And I thought, right, well, now I'm just going to focus on the meditation and coaching to support people with that. And so it makes, it doesn't mean to say I still don't get lots of ideas, and I think, I could do that and I could do that, and then I just have to come back and say, no, just remember what you're focusing on. And so that's sort of evolved, and I've been coaching some people with ADHD and teaching them how to meditate with great success, really, because I know the challenges that people are going to encounter, and I think I've seen things on social media and stuff, people saying, meditation is harder for people with ADHD. Well, it isn't, because okay, you might have a busy mind, but it's perhaps you don't really understand what meditation is. And I'm thinking, well, if ADHD had been a thing in the Buddha's day, I'm sure he wouldn't have gone around saying to people, well, you can't meditate, it's going to be really hard for you because you've got ADHD. It's just about working with your mind and whatever's present in your mind. And the truth is, it's like, okay, yes, I think I've got a very busy mind, but I don't know what's going on in anybody else's mind. It's just about, what's going on for me and my reality, and understanding that and working with that.
Yeah, what I've found through my therapy sessions, among many others, and I don't know how much research has been done on it, but enough that my therapist was talking to me about it, is the fact that people with ADHD are not just people struggling day to day, that there are doctors, there are attorneys, there are people in very high specificity jobs that have to be super focused at what they're doing. And what I've found with myself tying in, that when I'm working on something, I'm super focused, I'm laser focused. If somebody's reaching out, and even my wife, she'll say, you're not listening to me. And if I'm focused on something, then it's a little bit tougher to get through. So when I learned that not only was I not alone, but there are people that may look at in society as like, here are the top echelon of people, of whether it's how much they make or what they do. And my therapist said, doesn't that make sense? Do you want a surgeon to be in surgery and be focused on like 10 different things, or do you want them to be focused on that one thing? It's like, okay, this is the one thing I need to do. I'm not going to worry about all the other things. My training is going to come in, and I'm going to do what I'm asked to do. And so I think that's one thing that taking a step back of just learning that I'm not alone, and there are people in we call high functioning, and whether some people like those terms or not, but people that they're going day to day, they're in recovery, but they're people like you and I that we're finding ways to use our talents with what we have. And really, it's everybody has a brain, so it's not that, oh well, I have mental health and you don't, and she does and he doesn't. That once we kind of get people onto that page, which to your talking about institutions is so true, that you could talk to one instructor or one principal or a head of a school, and they're on board, but not everybody is, or they're on board, but the board of directors, and like who's really making the decisions. And I've found that's just tough as an individual. I'm trying to help people here. I don't have an ulterior motive, except I want to help people. So why would we be any different? If we have money appropriated for program XYZ, why wouldn't we add a little bit or use some of that for this individual who is passionate about what they're doing, and they are not going to really give up until the task at hand is done. If they need to coach 3 people for a course of a year, they're going to coach those 3 people for the course of a year. If they're going to coach 10 people, they're going to make the time to do it once they have kind of those marching orders, because it is something that they resonate with. That it's not just the money, it's, okay, does that connect with me as an individual? Because at some point, work is going to, no matter what work is, it's going to get to a point where it's going to be mundane at some points. It's like, oh, like, is really what I'm doing worth it? Am I really helping people? And so when you have more ties to it besides the dollars, and then you have that emotion tied to it, it makes things easier. Plus, we're living it. And that's one thing I believe, now looking back, like we say, hindsight's always 20/20, looking in the past. When I was in school, I didn't realize at the time, but I realize now that I loved the teachers, the instructors who had lived the situation, who lived the content in the textbook. Not just, we're going to go through this, 14 chapters throughout this course, and we're going to go over the definitions and the processes. And that's great. But what I found was somebody who actually lived it, I'm going to think of those experiences, and those are going to carry with me much further, many years into the future, than what the definition in chapter 2 of my marketing book said. And so when I teach now as an instructor, that's what I try to be. I say, you're a little bit of an ego, but it's like, you're not going to come across an instructor that is like me, because I'm living what I'm doing, and I'm living what we're going to be talking about. That if you want to come to class and just learn the textbook, you might have a little bit of a difficulty, because if that's all you're trying to do, which is, it's great in a sense, but that's not going to be what's going to take you 5 years into the future. So you know what? I don't remember much about the textbook, but I remember that one experience or that one marketing plan that instructor did. And that's why I love what you're doing, because you're living it. You're the instructor. You're the person that somebody can go to, and not just as an expert, but somebody who's living that, of saying, okay, she's an expert, but she's also living it. So she's not going to just try to push one idea or another. You're going to reach into your toolbox of everything that you've learned and you've been through, and you're going to share that with others. I love that approach. How does that make you feel when you're helping others, when you're connecting, like you said?
Oh, it just energizes me, really. It's like I can have a a day when my ADHD sort of like I struggle to get started on anything, and all, I feel like my brain's all over the place, and then but when I've got to coach somebody, it's like boom, I'm there. It's like when you're saying that hyper focus, my stuff goes out the window, and I'm there for them. And I think, well, also I did my coach training it was all about that. It was about, being aware of how we are when we show up to coach somebody, because that's going to have an effect on them. So if you'll have it, and then of course I used a lot of that when I was teaching as well. Once I learned this, I said, yeah, of course, if I go in and I think this kid's a bad kid, then what's going to happen? If unconsciously they're going to know that, and they're going to act that out. So if I, it's like so then you just start, you engage the imagination and just imagine, you're coaching, teaching, or whatever it is, or if it's a client even if it's somebody you work in a shop and it's somebody who comes into your shop, you just imagine this is a human with an unlimited potential, which everybody has, and anything that they do that's unskillful or unkind is just their stuff that they're acting out, because they don't know any better. And when like before, you change that viewpoint, it just makes life so much easier, and it just makes it easier to be kind to people and just be more understanding, and doing the same for yourself as well, because we're not perfect. We're just trying to muddle through life, and we want to be happy, and we make mistakes, but then it's like cutting yourself some slack and saying that's okay. I wouldn't speak, and it's looking at the way you speak to yourself and think, well, would you speak to a friend or a small child? Sometimes the way you speak to yourself, and if you wouldn't, then that needs to stop and cut yourself a bit of slack.
That's so true. Have you found, besides the pandemic itself, are there other, I guess, macro high-level factors you think that's really being a negative force on how mental health is in the UK, how it's perceived, and like the suicide rates and the addictions we have here in the United States, and even in specific in Northeast Ohio, in different areas, different pockets where it's tough, and we want to see more things done. We want to see people helped. We think that, oh, that's just a statistic of some other area, that's not in my neighborhood, or that's not somebody that I know. How do those factors factor into like what you're doing? Does it come up in your conversations? Are you finding that the news is like super focused on things, or they're turning away?
Well, I haven't watched the news for years, because it's just gives you a very distorted view of the world, because you just think, we're not saying that bad stuff isn't happening, but there's lots of good stuff happening as well. But it's all very sensationalist, isn't it? And I think, and the way certain people are portrayed, people, and I think things are changing slowly to become more compassionate. It's realising now, and especially as neurodiversity is being more talked about, and realising that how that's impacted on kids who struggle to like sit still in the classroom. They're more likely to end up, as you say, with substance misuse, or end up in prison, or getting into trouble with the police, because they've been misunderstood. And I think it's dealing with the governments. It's always difficult. It's always not enough money, but it's like trying to get across that actually, and this is what I was trying to do in schools. It's like, well, actually, if you invest in your staff, okay, you think you haven't got the money, but actually you're going to save money if you do that, because if they don't go off sick, then you haven't got to pay other teachers to come in, or recruitment costs when they leave. Instead of trying to recruit new teachers, why not look after the ones that you've got? And that's one example, because that's an example I know well, but know from my own experiences and the challenges I've had with my mental health. It's like dealing with some of the services. You're thinking, well, if you didn't have mental health problems before, you certainly do now. Dealing with Mr. I've got to tick all the boxes. That, well, we don't fit into boxes, and thinking that just because physically you look okay, then you can do anything. But it's like and the kind of language around people who, calling them scroungers if they're not working. And whereas there might be a valid reason, and the reason we pay our taxes is so that we can then have that if we are sick, if we are unable to work, that support is there when we need it. And I just hope, at some point that's going to change, and we stop judging people and just give them support. And again, it goes back to what we were saying before about, that okay, if you're ill or you're disabled or whatever, you're not a valuable or productive member of society. And it's like, well, we're all human, we all have value, and we offer that in different ways, and it doesn't necessarily have to be through work.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it comes just the way treatment comes in different forms. The mind and the body can do different things. One thing that, especially with Voices for Voices, it's not just people like you and I that are able to speak and communicate and able to do things that way. Somebody might communicate through art, and that might be how they communicate. They might not be able to speak, or that just might not be a strong suit of theirs. Or playing music, or doing sign language. It's so true with individuals, that we're individuals, and there are certain things that we're able to offer. There are certain gifts that we have, and it's more just about finding them and then working with somebody that helps us find them. Going back to the teaching, if the teachers are all negative or trying to, again, put everybody in a box and going that route, and an individual like, oh, they're a troublemaker, and it's like, well, maybe because they need to be, their skills and their gifts just need to be brought out a little bit differently. So if somebody is able to draw art and do things, maybe that's their way they communicate. And that's the part that I love definitely about my organization, but people like you as well, that you're finding, like, what can I do to help you? What aspect can I reach into my tools, to my experiences, and help? So whether that is the cooking, whether that is helping with the coaching, and I saw here that you are also you use comedy as well. You have in the past, and can you speak? Because I think that's a perfect example of it might help get across and might resonate with somebody.
Exactly. Well, I realised when I haven't really, actually, I did wake up the other day with like lots of ideas, and because I haven't really got back into it since the pandemic, because everything was closed, and I used to go and do open mic nights. And I realised now, when I first started doing it, it was learning about ADHD. I was dealing with some strong emotions and feeling rejected and things like that. But I've been able to sort of see the funny side of it, and saying, and seeing how other people interacted as well, and just seeing as humans, we just like that we're creatures of habit, and we do these things that don't make any sense, even though sometimes we know they don't make any sense, but we still do them anyway. And that's just really funny. And I think it helps not to take life too seriously as well, because we're meant to be here while we're on this planet, to enjoy ourselves, not saying a hedonistic way, but we're all entitled to be happy and have a good life. And that's not, like selfish thing to do, because if we help people be happy, then it makes the world a better place for everybody.
Yeah, it does. I 1,000% agree. And then you're also an author as well. So you are very much multifaceted. So whether it's through the spoken words, through the comedy, the helping, reaching into those experiences, putting those thoughts and ideas on the paper and into book form. Can you just speak a little bit about how you got started as an author, and if somebody out there might have an idea, like, why journal? How do I even get started?
Well, I just self-published a book, and I've got lots of other books that I've started and haven't published. A wonderful ADHD thing. It's like, oh yeah, I've got these ideas, or I get bored after a while. But at some point at the moment, but again, like I was saying before, yeah, all these ideas, and I'm thinking, right, it's not helpful to be trying to do too many things at once, and let's just focus on, at the moment, is the coaching and the meditation, and then the next thing leading out of that, I want to start running my own retreats. And so and I just feel, yes, would like to write some more, but at the moment that feels like a distraction to me. So it's for me, it's where I've got to make the best use of my time and my energy. And I think, you know, going back to what you were saying before about the fact that we're not as connected to our bodies anymore as we used to be, because we mostly, you know, we're looking at screens, we're up in our heads a lot. And I think, you know, this time of the year, for those of us that live in the northern hemisphere, when the days are shorter and darker and colder, it's also a time to naturally slow down as well. And so I try and honor that, you know, and I recognize at the moment, I'm like, some nights I sleep for 12 hours and that's okay. I'm not going to try and push myself anymore, because I realize that's what I used to do. And now I can kind of feel it sometimes. I feel, oh, that I'm pushing this, or doing something because I feel obliged, or that I ought to, you know. That's not to say you're avoiding your responsibilities, but at the same time, it sometimes helps to look at, well, what's the motivation behind me doing this? And is it really the best thing for me to take care of myself? So I don't, because when, you know, as you said, hindsight is 2020, and I look back over my life and see all the times that I've burned out through not knowing about ADHD and things like that, and trying to do things like everybody else was doing, and which didn't work for me. So now I understand that, and I think, well, I can be mindful, although it's not always easy, because you feel like there's pressures from outside and the people that don't understand. But it's about, you know, having the boundaries in place, and just knowing that, yeah, to value myself, and that my health and my well-being is just as important as anybody else's.
Yeah, 1,000% again agree, because I like you, there's times where my body just might need rejuvenated, and that's, if it's extra sleep that's needed, then that's what I'm going to do. And it's hard to share with others about it, like, oh, he's just being lazy, like he's sleeping until this time. It's like, well, to your point, looking back of all the times, like, try to keep up with keeping up with whoever the celebrity, or whoever the family or the friends know, and like, oh, well, we're never going to be able to do this because, you know, you're just too lazy about it. Instead of just saying, you know what, they're doing what's healthy and what's right for them, and that's going to lead to a longer life, I think, without, and I'm not a doctor, but just, I think common sense would show that if we're using our time wisely, that there's going to be some time where our body does need to heal and repair itself. There's all kinds of research now on how the body does rejuvenate at night, and, you know, they talk about beauty sleep, and how that's really a thing. And then it kind of dovetail back to one of your points about that we tend to just do things just because, like, well, I don't know, like, I drive to work every day, and I don't remember how. I mean, I drove safely, but I don't remember, like, which route did I take, and because we're just so in our head, we're just so into the patterns that we're in. And it takes me to one of the books I read. I can't think of the author, but I remember the title. It's called Thinking Fast and Slow, and it is to that point that there are certain things that we just do by habit, by nature, and there's part of our brain and part of our mind that does that. So when certain things come up, we go based off of our experiences of how we've handled things before. And then there's other parts where we may need to take a little bit more time to dive into a topic or an idea. And so I take a step back from both of those to say, I would rather take the time that I'm able to dive into certain topics, be as focused as I can, but I need to be as refreshed as I can to be able to do that. If I'm trying to go through all these patterns and try to dig deep into a topic or explain to a new therapist, especially for me, when I've over the 5 years, and things happen. So therapists, they retire, they move different areas, and it's hard because for many reasons. But what I found is I get so exhausted. Tell me why you're here. What brings you to therapy? And it's like, can you just look back on the notes of like the previous therapist? And so that's just an example of kind of working with a professional, but also working with family. When families ask questions, like, why are you doing this one thing? Like, you're not going to be able to see what happens for 6 months. Maybe you're working on a project and it's just not going to come to fruition for 6 months. But if you don't do these steps within the next couple of weeks or month or so, then you're not going to have the opportunity to have that chance. And I find individually that's tough even to this day. Of why are you doing that? Why you're just sitting there on your computer, and I do need to take more time away from it. But explaining that, and that goes into that just takes extra energy to my mind. And so if I need extra sleep, extra rest, then that's just the way it is. It's not that I want to be away or seclude myself. That's just the way my body it repairs itself. So I just love how everything you're talking about, it resonates with myself and here in the United States. And with you in the United Kingdom, that we are individuals, and that we just need to, again, to your point, be more compassionate to others. Would we speak to our family members, our children, the same way that we're speaking to somebody at work or whatever that may be? And I find myself just thinking about that. Like, would I want somebody speaking to well, she's going to be 4, but would I want somebody speaking to my daughter when she's able to be in the age of really being taught to in the schools, or would she maybe need a different approach? And I find that just being a parent, that one parent has a certain set of things and their mind works one way, and one's another. And never in a million years would I think that I'd be the parent that is more focused on the emotional side with my daughter. I would have thought that my wife is, and she is, and we both are, but there's times where she'll be at a gymnastics class and there'll just be a lot of noise and a lot of sound, and it'll just overwhelm her. And one day she didn't want to go into class, and I said, is all the extra noise bothering you? Because we were moving from one place to another, so she was used to a little more quiet when she was doing her class, and now it was just many more classes, many more people. And she shook her head and said, yeah. And my wife's like, you're just putting that thought into her head. And I said, no, I know from being on the spectrum, on the low end, with the way lights and sounds, how those things can really get at an individual. And so just because I'm 41 years old and she's 3 years old doesn't mean that we'd be any different. It just means that I'm just trying to help with some of my experience that maybe might be able to help her, to say, like, I'm your dad, but I relate to you with this. And it just, I loved your approach of talking about you can't just talk to the students, you have to talk to and get through to the teachers, the people that can really get that content spread out. Because if you teach each individual, then you're working through each family member. Whereas if you talk to the head of a school, then things can be a little bit more uniform in sharing that. And I just want to thank you for everything that you've done, that you are doing, your approach. you're even speaking with me today, many miles away, to talk about yourself, your journey, what you're doing. And so I guess I just like to close. Like, how can people get in touch with you, Helen, and find more about you?
Okay, well, I do post sort of regular guided meditations on YouTube, and that's just youtube.com/heal with Helen. My website is currently under construction. It hasn't, well, I thought I'd put it live, but it's still not working, so it's something else we need to sort out. But that will be healwithhelen.com, or you can email me hello@healwithhelen.com as well.
I love that email address.
Yeah, all the H's. I had to say it slowly, and I'm on LinkedIn as well, Helen Pengelly. So should be able to find me on there.
And I want to say to our viewers, our listeners, that's how I met Helen, was through LinkedIn. We didn't have a connection before then, and so that might be a way that individuals can meet others, and with like-minded, of liking the content, liking the background, just to have a conversation. It doesn't have to be a podcast, doesn't have to be a show. It could just be a conversation of just being able to connect with somebody and know that you can reach out to them, and again, have them in your network, that you might be able to share a contact, and you might be able to help them, and they might be able to help you. And I think that was big for me, just getting over that hump of, just reach out and see. You never know what can happen. And look, a month or two later, from just an ad as a connection on LinkedIn, a couple messages, getting scheduled, and here we are. And again, thank you so much for being with us. We'll put your email and your handles and your website in our show notes, so people will be able to find that easily. And thanks again, Helen, for your time and for everything you're doing. You're doing awesome. And it's always a pleasure to meet somebody, no matter where they're at in the world, that they're doing good. So thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you for having me on, Justin. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Voices for Voices podcast. Thank you also to our guest, Helen Pengelly from the United Kingdom, for spending some time with us. Thank you so much. Until next time, I am Justin Allen Hayes, founder and executive director of Voices for Voices, host and humanitarian. Until next time, have a great day and be a voice for yourself or somebody in need.